Welcome once again. I really trust that you're growing in the Lord and in a restoration of finding out what the real you is like, the reason you were born. And we're still on a halfway mark yet, but I hope it's been helpful to you. This time, I wanted to spend a moment talking about how do we evaluate our progress. So where are we at in the Christian life? And so the first thing that we are told by the scriptures is that we should examine ourselves to see whether or not we're really in the faith. Examine me. In fact, God's willing to help you examine yourself. David said, "Search me, O God. Know my heart. Try me. See if there be any wicked way in me." So, in fact, and that when we have communion, we take the bread and the cup in remembrance of the Lord's death until he come again. At that time, it's another time regularly for self-examination. Now, self-examination isn't about condemnation. It's about just checking up on ourselves. For me, I think I have to do it every hour. But you have to examine yourself in order to evaluate where you're at. So in order to do that self-examination, we really need to understand the big picture that, for God has chosen us. Okay, so what's he chosen us to do? That's the big question. And he's ordained us that we should go forth, bring forth fruit, that there should be results or fruit in our lives that should remain. So I want to spend just a moment just exploring with you what I refer to as the 5 aspects of the big picture. And if you can grasp these 5 aspects of the big picture, you'll know where you're at in the process and learn from what we've done wrong not to do the wrong again, and learn from what we haven't done yet to do the right thing now. That's the benefits of evaluating our progress. So what are the 5 aspects of the big picture? The first one is we must be reborn. Remember, Jesus said, you must be born again. Don't marvel that I say unto you, you have to be born again. It's reborn again is like an expression that means it's a new life. Remember, we're going back to the original because we got off track. Now we're getting back on track, right? So to be reborn simply means to change from self-rule, which is what we've been doing, playing God ourselves, to Christ rule. It's a change of management. It's a change of life management. It's a change of government from self-rule to Christ rule. That's the first thing. Are we genuinely converted and born again? And so lots of teaching available on that. And I'm not going to go into detail, but that's the first step. The second step, after you become a Christian, because the first step, get your heart right with God. The next step is to get your head right. Get my thinking straight. Reborn and then rethink. What does that mean? It means to learn to think right about every subject that affects my life. How do you do that? We must learn to think God's thoughts. I love this about God. He says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways and my thoughts above yours. And this is what he said. So is my word that goes forth out of my mouth. If you get it, it shall not return zero to you, but it will accomplish that which I please, and it will prosper unto the thing I send you, which is you, and you shall go out with joy. And you'll be led forth with peace, and it will be like the mountains and the hills will break forth into singing, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands, because you're coming. After we get our hearts right, we need to get our heads right. We need to learn to think God's way about every subject. That's why the love of the truth is so important. To rethink simply means to think God's right way about every subject. Oh, let me spend a moment longer. Got to learn to think right about friends. Got to learn to think right about marriage. Got to learn to think right about love. Got to learn to think right about sex. Got to learn to think right about problems. Most people don't know how to think about problems God's way. Let me quote Phillips' translation in James. Listen to this now. When all kinds of trials and temptations crowd into your lives, my brothers, do not resent them as intruders, but welcome them as your friends. Realize they've come to test your faith and to produce in you the quality of endurance. And if in the process, any of you does not know how to meet a particular problem, he has only to ask of a God who gives generously to all men without making feel guilty or ashamed. See, problems from God's way are stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. Most people, we just have to learn to think right about every subject that affects our life. Number 3, get our heart right, get our head right. Now we got to get our feelings right. We've got to refocus our emotions. That is, we've got to get our emotions going the same way as God's thoughts. Because if God says go this way, but your feelings are going the opposite way, that's tough. Now, if that's the case, we still got to go God's way, kicking, screaming, dragging ourselves. But how much better if we can learn how to get our feelings turned around, going the same direction as God's thoughts. Then feelings are no longer a monster. Now their feelings are energy to help you do what you know is right. I probably mentioned this to you before. I don't know if I did, but I learned that emotions were never designed by God to be a guidance system. They're to be the empowerment behind right thinking. So look at now, we're getting through the 5 aspects of the big picture. Be reborn, get your heart right with God, rethink, get your head right, refocus your emotions, which means get your directions empowered by your feelings. Okay? Emotions empowered by, directions empowered by your feelings. And the 4th step is now to replan your life. How can you plan your life if you haven't learned to think right yet? How can we replan our lives if our feelings are still in control and driving us the wrong direction? And so the next step in the big picture is to plan your life based on right thinking. So what does it mean to replan? So let me give you a little bit of a diagram here. In the replan, what we do now is we set goals. Now they're different than they used to be because now we've learned to think right. We want spiritual goals, educational goals. Now we establish domestic goals, family goals, marriage goals, vocational goals, ministry goals, and in fact, financial goals. Replanning your life, putting your life. Remember, reborn, put your heart together. Rethink, put your head together. Refocus, get your feelings together. Replan, get your life together. So what is it? Replan means to plan your life based on right thinking. Now, the 5th step is to reproduce. And what does that mean? It means to have the ability to lead others through these same 5 aspects of being Christian. Now I'm going to try and show you a diagram. So brace yourself. This is what it looks like. I know your screen is bright right now, but remember, here are the 5 steps, right? First step over here. Second, get your feelings together. I didn't have room to put refocus emotions on there. Replan your life, and then reproduce. These are the 5 aspects. Now watch again the diagram with me. Reborn has to do with getting your heart right with God, getting Jesus in the management position. Then we learn to think God's way about every subject, gets our head right. And then thirdly, we learn to get our feelings going the right way. Now, watch with me for just a moment, because what this means, from here over to here, this is getting back on the right moral track. God's track, your original intentions from God. Wow, so wonderful. All right, now watch where we go from here. So now we've got on the moral track. So now in the Replan, we're going to get our life right. Remember the goals? Marriage goals, domestic goals, family goals, financial goals, educational goals, spiritual goals. Now we replan our life. And watch this now. Because the last step in this big picture of the Christian life is this area of reproduce, where we learn how to bring others through the same steps of maturity. What is number 5? Number 5, which is reproduce, is being able to bring someone else to number 1. Helping them learn to think God's way about every subject just the way you did. Helping them to follow the 6 principles on how to get their feelings under control, so get their feelings right. Then you can help them know the principles on how to replan their life, and hopefully share with them how to reproduce so they can go and get somebody back here and over again. And guess what we've got going on now? This is the big picture of the Christian life. So my question to you is, where are you at right now in the picture? Because the way to get back on track is to find out where you got off track. Have you got Jesus in your heart, ruling unchallenged by anybody or anything? Then you're on your way here. Where are you at in thinking? Have you learned to think God's way about every subject that touches your life? Because wherever you're at in this process, maybe you're halfway there, then you need to pick up here and go the rest of the way. All the subjects that relate to life. Have you got your feelings under control? Whereabouts are you in this one? Have you got this going? Because wherever you're at, this is why you want to evaluate yourself. And this is how you know where you're at, because that's the starting point of where you lead to go from now on. Have you got your life plan now? Have you learned the principles of spiritual reproduction? Can you get somebody over here and then teach them this, and then teach them this, and then teach them this, and then teach them this so they can teach somebody else? Can you do that? That's the question. This is how you evaluate your life. It's a happy, happy, happy thing when you can fill in the blanks and know exactly where you're at. Because when you know where you're at and you know where you need to go, you know the steps that you can start taking to get there. This, by the way, is what I refer to. This is discipleship. Once you are what you should be, then you want to go out and train everyone you meet, far and near, in this way of life. And if you'll do that, you're on the path. You are recovered. You're part of the solution, not part of the problem, because you take time to evaluate where you're at in the system, plug in there, and grow forward. And as you do, you'll fulfill what Jesus promised when he said, "You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. I have chosen you that you should go forth and bring forth fruit, and your fruit shall remain."
Discover and uncover the truth about you.
At the core, everybody needs to have an accurate identity. They need to know who they are, what they are, and why they're here. Otherwise, life is just a maze and it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Author David L. Johnston's new book, Why You Were Born, will give you a new appreciation for your true self.
You turn from a question mark to an exclamation mark.